Hi everybody. In this video I would like to attempt to review the Jonasa Jaus Tarot. Now this is not a review of this particular edition, which is the third and last edition. As you can see here, I think she's moving on and in the middle of creating another tarot deck, which I am looking forward to seeing more of. I am here really reviewing the content, quote unquote, the so-called content of this deck, because from my understanding, the first, second, and third edition of the Jonasa Jaus Tarot is actually the same artwork. The only differences are cardstock size of cards, colors of backs of cards, or designs of backs of cards, and colors of boxes. I do not have the first edition, but I've spoken about the various editions in a previous video, so I will refer you to that video to find out a bit more about that. Here I would like to talk about the content being her take on each of the cards, her expressions on those takes that she have apparently learned from Jodorowsky's book, which I have mentioned in another video about a show and tell video, sharing with you some of my Marseille beginners books which have been recommended to me. And so I will refer you to that video as well to take a look further at that. And so as you can see here, the color palette is limited to a few. You can see black, white, green, and purple, and this kind of skin color tone here. And that's pretty much it. And it has this sort of pen to paper quality to the artwork that I really like, which also reminds me somehow of sort of mid-20th century poster and comic book art. For some reason, it reminds me of the 50s and the 60s when you see posters, whether it's advertorial or movie posters, or you know, those adverts with people in them. Comic book as well. And so initially I have to say that I held myself back from purchasing the first edition because I'm always a bit iffy with depictions of humans in cards like this, because I often found them really awkward. I love, absolutely fell in love with her non-human depictions of things when I first saw the images for the very first time on my Instagram, on Cracked Amethyst's Instagram account. She or he is a creator of the Idiosyncra deck and the Amethyst Oracle. And but I held myself back. And as I look at the second edition, as the second edition came out, again, I was reluctant, but I was very conflicted because I love her other depictions like this when there's no humans or no human faces like this one here. I absolutely fell in love with them. There's something that drew me in like this one here. You would think about this as a death automatically because you're, you know, my previous conditioning in terms of what images means what captured me. But when I saw this, that's the Emperor, and it was just such a fascinating, that firmness, that, you know, staying put. It reminds me of the story of Rory and Amy of Doctor Who, the Matt Smith incarnation of Doctor Who after David Tennant. I can't remember, is that the 11th? Do you know that centurion that guarded that cube for 2,000 years because he was basically guarding the person that he loves? Amy was captured or trapped in that box. And how you imagine someone staying so rooted, so stable, so firm that they decay and die and crumble on the spot without relenting, without... It has the energy, or it has the sense, or the principle, or the undercurrent of the force, you know, that absolute stability. And on the shadow side, stability, stagnation is this decay, because if you don't move, if you don't keep moving, things decay anyway, but if you don't keep moving, you don't grow and you just decay. It is such a fascinating, refreshing take for me personally. So that's the Emperor, and there's a few of those depictions, especially in the Major Arcana, where you think it's one thing, it's actually something else, and that's the Five of Cups, and this is the Moon. See, like this depiction, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, but after seeing the images over and over again, the positive, the things that attracted me to the images slowly overshadowed the things that I don't like about it. And now I just don't remember why I don't like it when I first saw the images, especially of the images of the human, because I liked everything I saw that was non-human from the get-go. This is the Six of Cups. It almost have that sense of the Five of Cups if you're used to the Rider-Waite-Smith, that sort of forlorn, regretful looking. But this is the Six of Cups, and after Googling Galician English dictionary many times, in fact, every time I played around with these cards over here, I have to Google the Galician English translation to things. I still don't know what certain things mean, and I am still Googling, but at an increasingly less and less frequency, I Google the meanings. People mention Portuguese as well, and so I'm not quite sure. I'm very ignorant about that part of the world, but I believe I read somewhere that these are Galician, which perhaps may be similar to Portuguese. I'm not sure. So this is the Six of Cups, and in the Rider-Waite-Smith understanding of the Six of Cups, it's that kind of linking the past, and I come to understand the Six of Cups, combining that with other takes of the Six of Cups as this harmony. In Crowley's deck, it's I think it's called Pleasure. It's this harmony between two sides of the coins. I've learned that past and present, two people in harmony, uniting without blending into each other, maintaining the separation of the polarity, but having that unity, meeting in unity from time to time. And that state of unity in a constant polarity is the Six of Cups. And here it has a sense of almost the Six of Swords more than anything, or at least the Rider-Waite-Smith's version of the Six of Swords. This kind of, the dawn is coming, the day is coming, a new day is coming, or maybe it's setting. I don't know. It's interesting that I see this as the new dawn is coming. So obviously I'm projecting my own state of being there, and so this is why these things are quite fascinating tools for me. Anyway, so it might be dawn, it's the cusp anyway of one day ending and another day beginning, let's say. How about that? So that's a more of a universal, a more macro translation of that. A new day is coming, an old day, and it's the cusp of the end of one and the beginning of another. And she's letting go almost like this. If this is the suit of water, if the cups is a suit of water, if the suit of water represents the spirit, the soul, the emotion, the more ethereal part of our existence. So that's, you see what I mean by it's just fascinating. It's probably maybe because her take on this is from the Marseille point of view. Not only it's from the Marseille point of view, it's from Jodorowsky's Marseille point of view. And so it's unique in that sense because then she translates her understanding of those two scenic minors in a way that we are more used to with the Rider-Waite-Smith. And so I think perhaps the uniqueness come from that, but also, as I've mentioned in another video, and feel free to refer to that video, the creator of this deck apparently, if I understood this correctly, do not read. I mean, she understands tarot very well, obviously, or well enough to create, to express her own understanding of each of the archetypes in this manner artistically. This is an expression of her understanding of each of the archetypes. That's the Four of Wands, the Four of Batons, the Four of Stars. This is the Six of Swords. So that's interesting that the Six of Swords is someone who's pregnant. The Six of Swords that we commonly understand as moving on in the realm of the mental realm, moving on with that boat. And so, as I was saying, she is not a reader as such. her reading journey is just starting from what I understand. But like all learning, especially learning languages, you always learn passive before you learn actively. You always learn to understand before you learn how to speak. You always learn how to read before you learn how to write. And you learn how to understand someone speaking to you in a particular language before you learn how to actively engage in that language by speaking. And so I think that gives this deck a unique perspective as well. And I am ever so grateful to encounter it and to finally decide to get this. So just quickly about this, it's interesting to me that she's pregnant. Again, it's that new beginning. I'll be quite curious to see if my impression of that, if my take on that, just combining my own understanding of the Six of Cups and the images here, is correct. I am less familiar with Jodorowsky's take on things, and I need to do that next just out of curiosity, really. I was in the middle of doing that, and then I got distracted by other things as I do. It would be interesting to see if she ever write a book about the cards, if that is indeed her intention there. I can't claim to know her intention because we don't know, but this is what I'm getting. It's interesting that there is pregnancy depicted here because, again, if you think about it, commonly it is associated with the Empress, and like a lot of you, a pregnant Empress sometimes makes me feel quite impatient because it's such a narrow take on the Empress. But anyway, I'll talk about that some other time. So this is the Two of Swords. So that flower is the swords, that sharp looking, I don't know why I think of, see, this is the other thing that I find interesting. I have this sense of the same sense, and I've spoken about this in yet another video talking about tarot decks by non-tarot readers. Osvaldo Manegazzi of Il Meneghello give me the same sense with his take on the major arcana. There's always something that he depicts, and then to me it feels so natural to think of those images as those archetypes, but I can never explain why. And like this one here, to see this flower here seems so natural to think about the swords, because the flower seems sharp. That's all I can tell you. The flower seems sharp to me. And let's have a look at this is the mage or the magus or the magician. This is the Five of Swords. This is the Nine of Coins. And this one here, again, almost instinctively or intuitively, I see as coins upon seeing that she have chosen this as coins, because these flowers reminds me of, I'm not quite sure if they are actually buttercups, you know, those little yellow flowers with this iridescent sort of pearly shimmer on it, and they look like tiny wee gold coins. So this is the Page or the Jack of Cups. This is Two of Wands. And the flowers here to me feels fiery. I don't know why that is. It just seems to be fiery to me. So that's the Two of Wands. When I first started, I confused this with the Two of Coins, I think, because of how large and rounded they are. But as soon as I realized that the buttercups or the buttercup-like is the suit of coin, and it feels more natural to see those as coins, I immediately see that as bursts of fire instead of large discs. Quite easily, within a split second, I made that transition very, very easily. And it feels very intuitive. Now here, you almost want to say hanged man or the hanged one. And here it is, or perhaps this is actually the hanged man. For some reason, I thought this is the hermit. Number 12. No, that's the hangman. No. Okay, so intuitive indeed. Is that right, hangman? Yeah, I'll get back to that. Put that aside. This one is Temperance. The Queen of Swords, the Ace of Coins, 11, Strength. I'm still quite figuring this out. It's like this woman bursting against this plants. Looks quite gigantic. It looks almost as if these plants are supposed to be smaller, and yet they are as large as she is, or she is as small as they are. and how strength, and it feels right that this is strength, and I can't explain to you why. And so if I can one day, I will get back to you on more of my take on the cards. At the moment, I'm sharing with you my take on the cards as a way of reviewing it, as a way of showing and demonstrating to you why this is so intuitive and so refreshing to me. Even though I can't tell you how so, I can show you. This is the Nine of Wands. I've learned now that nove is 9. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but caballero, cavalier, caballero, the Knight of Swords. This is the Three of Wands, or the Three of Baton, or the Three of Staffs. The bastos, again, I don't know how to pronounce that, but bastos, baton seems quite close. Tres, uno, duo, tres, three. Again, I mean, it's kind of obvious from the... And so that's this is justice. Again, it's all I can tell you is that 2 words came to my mind every time I use this deck: intuitive and refreshing. And they are perhaps more intuitive when you, or for me anyway, when you read them, when there are several cards in front of you. And this justice is at this hand. You're not quite sure whether this hand belongs to this human plant or human flower here, or whether the 2 hands are actually someone else's hand and they're cutting. It is harvest time, and even though you feel like you are cutting the head from the body, it is right to do so because it is capturing the flower at its height. Because if you leave them, they'll tend to rot and die off on the stems anyway. And so in that sense, it's painful, but it's right. Justice sometimes is painful. Balance in the universe, the equilibrium is sometimes painful, but it's just. It's as it should be. It is how it is, and it is as it should be. So that's my take on it. But what I was going to say is that this is one. If I can't remember that, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8 of Swords. Now, it can be quite cumbersome for those of you who would like to just read it and just flow with it, stopping and starting and stopping and starting, having to check the Galician English dictionary can be disruptive to the flow. In which case, I can suggest to you that just reading the images side by side like this is when it's most flowy to me, that it's most intuitive to me, when they are simply read as pictures, simply read as illustrations. When you simply read intuitively what you see without wondering what it means, without wondering what cards you're looking at. And I think I think we understand that as reading intuitively. I think that's frowned upon by, really, whether you read one way or another really depends on your approach and your take to tarot. Really, it depends on what you use tarot for. Really depends on what you use your images and your cards for. One way of reading I found can be more conducive to to one set of goals than another. And so that if I have other goals to read cards or images for, I found that adjusting your style of reading or your approach to the images can help achieve that goal. And I am in the opinion that whatever works for your goal is the right way to achieve that goal. And so if you are impatient with having to constantly consult what card you're looking at, simply read the images like this is actually very, very, I found these images to be very friendly with intuitive reading in that manner. And so, for example, here you have a very darkened face, and she did say that the males in these cards are faceless because she wanted to highlight the female aspect of the images. And so there's the King of Swords there, somebody with a sword and a throne, and those flowers there, which is the flower of the suit of sword, that I say look quite sharp. There is the High Priestess over here, and then what I initially saw as the Fool is actually the stars, or the star. And so you can read the King of Swords, the High Priestess, and the star, or you can simply read this as someone in the seat of power that is in the shadow and looking backwards. If you see that as the past, it's a very ethnocentric directional attribution, because we read from left to right, so we see the left as the past, and somebody who is used to reading right to left may think of the right as the past. So, but let's go with the left as the past for a minute. And looking towards the future, you are in charge of your past, even though in the past there's some shadow. You are now looking forward with renewed vision, with renewed inner vision towards a promise of a new day, for example. That's it. That's a reading there. And so it's very friendly to intuitive reading, even if you have no idea what you're looking at. Just look at the images and read it. And I found that, again, I've showed that in a different video where I respond to Veronica Rose and her spread. She created a spread about inner stories. And in that video, you saw me literally use those cards for the very first time. And it's that intuitive. And so I'm sorry to repeat myself, but if I were to conclude this review by simply using two words, I would say intuitive and refreshing. But you do have to be willing to let go of your preconceived notions of what the images are or should be. And if you prefer to understand what you're looking at, I can tell you that going back several times to the Galician English dictionary in the course of one reading is well worth it. It is tedious, but it's not difficult. You just have to lay out your cards, stop, and literally type in the word into the Galician English dictionary, every word one at a time, and you'll get there. I used to carry with me an English dictionary to exams with special permission from the professors, and I used to have to write 5,000 words in English using a dictionary, consulting every word sometimes, every step of the way, and I managed to write my argument clearly, and I managed to score a B+. And so it is tedious, but it is not hard. It is easy. You just have to do it one word at a time. And so this is the Fool, and the Fool is 22. And so for you who are quite used to a lot of these Marseille decks, would not be surprised to see that the Fool is at the end after the World. Most of the times the Fool aren't numbered, but even when they're not numbered, you often see in Marseille decks or older French decks. I'm not quite sure if Italian decks do the same thing, but you often see the Fool as at the end of the major arcana when you receive a new deck and the cards are stacked in order. You often see it starts with number 1, the Magician, or le Battleur, I don't know how to pronounce that name, the Magus, and then ends with the Fool at the end. Here it is numbered 22, and so this is, again, such an interesting take on the Fool. I mean, if you see the Star, which I initially thought this is one of my favorite. Is this 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 of coins. It's just waiting to take over the world. The whole world lies in front of it. So if you see, where is it? If you remember the Star, if you could see that there is a face looking into this darkness in the sky with a star, like almost like the Fool stepping into the precipice, if you remember. And so that would probably be your Rider-Waite-Smith baggage, immediate knee-jerk reaction, and yet this is the Fool. Now, how refreshing is that? Look at her eyes, the owl's with her, and she is... I'm having trouble telling you why this is so refreshing, so I'm just going to let you see this. This is the Fool. This is the mad one, and in the French, what is it? I can't remember the word, but the mad one, the crazy one, the foolish one, the crazy Fool. And then look at her eyes. It just gives you such a different layer and a different slant to your understanding of the crazy Fool that begins everything and ends everything. I mean, that's the Star. That can be the Fool But imagine a Fool like that. It's refreshing. It's intuitive and it's refreshing. That's all I can say repetitively as I demonstrate to you the images, my take on it, and potentially how it performed, at least for me. So this is the Hermit here. It's interesting that I just noticed this very minute. That's probably why I confused that chrysalis or that the hanged person, the hanged one, not a hanged person because it wasn't a person. That's probably why I thought that was the Hermit, because the Hermit is the butterfly. Bear with me. Not a chrysalis. Is it a chrysalis? Not a cocoon, but it is, I think you call it a chrysalis. It is a butterfly in the making. And interestingly, they're both hanged upside down. And you have a story there. You know, the chrysalis is indeed the process of being quiet within itself before. Actually, I need to Google that. I wonder what that says. You know, going into oneself before finally blooming into your true self. There is the Hermit. No, there is the hanged person. And then there's the Hermit. Or is that the hanged person and the Hermit? Arguably, if you're reading this intuitively, it doesn't really matter. Because that will become that. And that will end up in that. And that will end up here. Here will end up there, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think that's the Hermit. I remember 18 is a star, sorry, the moon. And if you combine 1 and 8, you have the Hermit. And that is the hanged one. And that the process of the hanged one is the process of rebirth, like the Hermit is, emerging from the underworld back out into the living world. And there's a lot of stuff you can, just with these two, the hanged one and the Hermit, there's a lot there. There's a lot to think about and to ponder about. And that is and it's a new way of looking at the Hermit and the hanged one. So it's great. I highly recommend this. If you are open to intuitive reading, if you are open to reading just the images without knowing what cards you're looking at, and if you are open to Googling every step of the way the Galician English dictionary online and entering each word, every one of them one by one, if you are a little in love with this sort of graphic art of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, if you are in love with this kind of color scheme, I mean, look at that sort of against, I prefer the back of the previous editions, but this isn't too shabby. This kind of aesthetic. If you are, if you have small hands and you don't mind shuffling this way, the long way. I have something here that bumped me, so I can't stroke too long because my hand is so. If you have larger hands and you want to riffle shuffle, I have really, really tiny hands and short fingers. My hand is not that tiny, but my fingers are short. I can force myself. It's very strenuous, and I can't do this in reality for more than once or twice. If I can do this, all of you with larger hands will be able to do this. So look at that. I can reach this, but it's very, very painful for me at the moment. And then you can do this. The cardstock on the 3rd edition is the thickest, but it's still very, very friendly to riffle shuffling because it's skinny. And so I can't do that for an extended period of time. But most people have larger hands than me, so I'm thinking that for most of you this is doable. I can't do it this way because it's too narrow. So it's a bit tricky because there's not enough width this way for me. So for me personally, the only way to shuffle is this way. But I can see most of you who I am betting have larger hands than me. This is so riffle shuffleable. Riffle shuffleable here. I get much better shuffle than this when my reach is better and I have more elbow room at the moment. My setup here doesn't allow that. So in conclusion, it riffle shuffles really, really well if you have larger hands than me. And hold on, let me measure this for you. It is 15 or 14.5 centimeters, or 14 centimeters, and about 5.5 inches. 5.5 inches. So it's not any bigger. It's not any longer than the average oracle or large tarot cards, but it's just narrower. So the width and the thickness doesn't really matter. It's the length that people are concerned about. This is probably why she's made the cardstock smaller, because I think the original is a lot larger. And again, if any of you have the first large edition, the cardstock's also really, really thin. So really large and really thin isn't actually a really good combination as a working deck. I would love it for my collection. If any of you are letting go of yours, please contact me. Yeah, so there is the size there. Is that 5.5? Yeah. So it's 14 centimeters and 5.5. So it's not that much larger, if at all larger, than the average jumbo deck. So I hope that's been useful, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.